Hello world. Hey everyone, hope you're all doing okay. Today we're going to take a look at Intel and AMD regarding their usability in different scenarios. Intel has dominated the processor market for a significant period, and while they were enjoying the monopoly, they fundamentally controlled the crucial factors about their products like price, implementation, architecture, clients, and the landscape of the industry as a whole. They enjoyed their leading position for quite a while, but in recent years, AMD ramped up their processor game by offering these different processor products and they actually researched and developed a newer processor architecture which is way better than Intel's, and it actually turned out to be way more efficient, which begs the question, did Intel slack off and were they charging us more price than we were supposed to pay? The answer is yes, to some extent, but that's what happens when you have little to no competition. Recently, there has been a lot of talk about Intel, like should you even consider Intel, or is Intel pointless now? The answer is of course not. But if it keeps up the 10 nanometer up for more than a specific period, it might. We have all these giants like Nokia, HTC, BlackBerry. They were these business giants that they were worth millions and or even billions of dollars. And unfortunately, in 2020, today, they are completely irrelevant. Let's take a look at Intel. In my personal experience, Intel is still widely compatible with a number of machines, softwares, hardware modules, and motherboard designs. And that's their main value proposition these days. They can't say, "Oh, we're the best performing around the block." No, they can't, because to me and to a lot of other consumers, compatibility when it comes to Intel, compatibility is the number one thing that they offer. We'll come back to that in a bit, but they still have very respectable single core and competent multi-core performance. However, that performance is dependent on the clock speed, overclocking, heat management. But there is just so much you could do with those things to increase performance. At a certain point, you're gonna end up facing this barrier, and they're not the most efficient approaches. AMD spotted this opportunity. It took them a while, but better late than never. They did spot it, and they actually redesigned their whole processor architecture. This modification allowed them to reduce their processor die, which resulted in way more transistors on a single chip, and it also increased performance by a huge margin. For personal and small virtual machines use like Linux distros, for example, Intel still has a wider compatibility than AMD. With AMD processor and modules, you're gonna likely run into a VirtualBox or VMware error. And it's useful for specific use cases like using a proprietary software or using something that is highly reliant on an instruction set like SSC or AVX. And it is also better for PlayStation 2 emulator PCSX2. I don't know why I'm saying this in this video, but I thought I would just mention it. Newer emulators can benefit from AMD higher core counts and more threads, but PS2 Emotion Engines, which is so weird, it was actually designed by Toshiba. It's a very unusual architecture. It uses Emotion Engine, so it requires a competent and more stable single core speed. And due to that very unusual architecture that I mentioned, that's why we still can't get 100% efficiency when it comes to PCSX2. I still have this old laptop lying around with AMD GPU, and I get these horrendous errors whenever I try to run even something even slightly demanding. Let's take a look at AMD. AMD has been competing in industry with Intel for years, but it has been playing second fiddle to Intel due to lack of resources, marketing, and research. AMD processors are cheaper, better, and just more efficient. There's no denying that, of course. And also, Intel suffered from these awful processor vulnerabilities, Spectre and Meltdown. You can read more about these at meltdownattack.com. Intel dominance meant more developers and engineers developing hardware and software which were Intel focused, and that is where the original AMD processor and GPU issues stemmed from. But here's the deal-breaking thing. Those issues that I mentioned earlier, more than 90% of the errors that you encounter regarding compatibility, they can be solved by modifying the config file or modifying the registry entries or even fiddling around in the BIOS in some cases. So yeah, and they used to be worse, but it's only going to get better from here as more entities accept AMD as a provider and more developers work on the software integration. This compatibility issue they used to have is not rare actually. ARM-based PCs have the same problem. Running any applications which is like 32-bit or 64-bit actually requires an additional layer of software because ARM chips were specifically designed for mobile devices and not for these workstations or for these laptops. Scaling their production to this level is obviously going to come with some drawbacks, but they're going to be phased out as these devices become more and more mainstream. So, what's the conclusion? Intel still has a significant compatibility across a wide range of sectors, but AMD is closing the gap extremely fast. In this regard, it is very refreshing to see increasing competition in this space, and as you know, competition is always better for the end consumer as we get to use cheaper and better devices overall. I sincerely hope that Intel can come up with 7nm nodes to compete with AMD, then maybe AMD can do them one better and come up with these 5nm nodes, so this competition can keep on going. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you guys later.